Okay, hey everybody, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a pretty cool episode for you guys from the brand Sero Watch Company. A little about them. They were founded in 2023 and they're a boutique brand rooted in the Netherlands, born from friendship and a shared devotion to quality. The name Sero blends the founders' names, Sergio and Robert, symbolizing unity, passion, and purpose. In terms of the type of watch, this is a dress watch. Some key characteristics in design language, you're looking for something that you can dress up on a daily basis. Of course, you're going to find a relatively clean and minimal design, and of course something that's in a modestly sized package, which this signature line from them in the blue colorway, I think really is. In their words, this is a modern interpretation of classic 1930s and 1960s within that kind of range there and that spread of dress watches, crafted with meticulous attention to detail. This does feature a metallic brush dial with deeply engraved Breguet numerals, heat-blued spade hands, and a slim 37.5 millimeter stainless steel case, which is all very, very nice. I have to say, execution-wise, very, very handsome. And if you are somebody who really pays attention to details, you will like this watch. Also, I think proportionally what they've done is very interesting, because as you look at this, it's quite expansive. You wouldn't think that this is just a 37.5 millimeter watch. My sweet spot is around 38.5, and this seems larger. And again, it's because of the proportions, not because of the scale. So proportionally, this has a pretty wide open dial, also a very thin bezel. So the nice thing is you're going to get all of that great visual punch and visual weight while keeping the actual physical weight and footprint to a minimal. So I like that. So with that said, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, now apart from design, for me, the standout feature here is going to be the blend of the scale as well as the overall proportions. Now, this is going to give you a lot of visual punch, but in a very small package at just 37.5 millimeters, which is great for a dedicated dress watch, but I think still has enough of a footprint and definitely enough visual weight to where it can be dressed down for daily wear. In terms of thickness, guys, 9.7 millimeters, very nicely done. And you can see the proportions again are quite handsome here. Very thin, finely brushed. I would go out there and say luxury-like hairline brushing there on that mid case. And you can see quite thin. And then you have a nice bit of symmetry when you look at, of course, the bezel as well as the case back as they sandwich that mid case. Very, very thin, very, very handsome. Lug to lug, 46.5. So very wearable with a nice curvature there. You can see that will wrap around the wrist quite nicely. This is going to have a 316L stainless steel construction, brushed and polished as you guys noticed, and a low dome sapphire, so it's not adding any thickness there. But you can see it's also not giving you a lot of distortion at angle, which is a nice quality there. So that means if there is any, I should say not if, but the curvature basically is matched on the underside as well as the outer sides, which is going to be what really translate in terms of that clarity there as you are looking at this at even quite harsh angle. Let me get the camera to focus a bit. There you go. Check that out. Very, very nice. Now, the crown is a push-pull crown, nicely signed. And of course, inside, check this out. And I'll even do this for you. Ooh, wrong direction. Wrong direction. Oh, wait. Huh. Oh, it's not lined up right now. I'll have to hack it, pop it. There we go. So, here we go. Little wind action. Very nice. As you guys can see, this is a manual winding Sellita SW210-1 Bravo in the Elaboré finishing. 45-hour power reserve, beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 beats per, I would say vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. And you can see that through that exhibition Sapphire case back. You're also going to notice blued screws, again, quite nicely executed. So very handsome. The only thing I'd say about this watch is, as you've noticed, is it picks up fingerprints quite easily, you know, because one, polished surfaces, and two, man, this thing's so nice. You want to touch it. You want to have tactile engagement with this one just because you're examining it, looking at these fine ornate details. I mean, look at the 3D nature on that spade hour hand. There's just so much detail that's there that you really have to, you know, get at angle to truly appreciate. Look at that. Very, very nice. Now, in terms of the rest of the dial, vertically brushed with engraved Breguet numerals that do have a fill in them, as you can see, so that it has a darker tint in terms of maximum legibility. Quite nice, but you can also see that there is, you know, the deep engraved contouring there. You're still going to be able to pick that up with the naked eye. It just is going to take a little bit of extra looking there. But I will say, again, this is a watch that you want to look at. So especially in this colorway, I think it is a nice blend of very low key, but still having enough visual interest to really draw you in. Polished and heat blued handset. You're getting 10 atmospheres or 100 meters of water resistance, which is, again, outstanding for a watch like this, a dress watch at that. That means it's built to a nice tolerance. It doesn't mean that I'm going to use this for water sports. It just means that I don't have to worry about it as much, which I can appreciate. Another thing in terms of the proportions, 20 millimeter lugs. And I think that looks fantastic. And it's also quite versatile. You're getting this genuine handmade ostrich leather 2-piece strap with a custom signed pin buckle. And this is another thing that will give you an idea of the quality of this piece. Of course, this is a press unit, so it has a little bit of wear and tear from kind of bouncing around here and there, being photographed, videoed, etc. But you can see here when it comes down to that, that is not an off-the-shelf tang buckle. That is unique, and you can see fully milled, beautifully beveled, multi-finished and faceted, and again, the really high level of brushing quality there is very nice, and also clearly and very nicely signed. It does have a shorter length at just 105 millimeters on the longer side and 70 millimeters on the shorter side. For me, I'm definitely more of somebody that tries to target for a 120 and 80 millimeter length. But with that said, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay. Ooh, yes. Check that out. It actually seems much larger than you would think for a 37 and a half. And again, that is due to that expansive dial. Of course, my wrist is on the larger side of average. It's 7.5 inches or 19 centimeters in circumference. And even if I get my wrist a bit up and closer to the lens, you're going to notice quite a bit of perspective distortion, which is going to make the watch seem a lot larger than it is because the sides of my wrist are falling away, which means so are the straps on the sides. But if I keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the frame here, you're gonna be able to get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And as you can see, much better centering there. And again, at 37 and a half, I would say if you have a larger wrist, do not be discouraged. If you have a smaller wrist, don't be discouraged by how large this might look. Again, this is just an expansive dial. An open dial watch is going to look like that, especially with that very minimalist bezel there. So very nice. Look at the thinness, guys. Of course, that's one of the benefits you get with that manual wind movement. With this just under 10 millimeters, I have to say it is quite nice. And you still do get the benefit of a slight dome on the crystal there. So it's not just flat, which is also a nicety. But this one has a lot of beautiful details here, especially when it comes to a lot of those kind of traditional watchmaking hallmarks that you associate with quality, right? The texturing, the engraving, the heat blued hands, even the shape of the hands in that spade shape there is just really quite handsome. And then cap that off with this Very nice proportioned mid case, quite thin, sandwiched in between a very symmetrical looking bezel as well as case back. And then, of course, even a nice little signature there in between those 20mm lugs. This ostrich leather here is quite nice, quite supple. Again, quite short though, unfortunately, down to the last 2 holes for my wrist, which isn't the largest wrist. But it is larger than average. So if you do have a larger than 7.5 inch wrist, just be wary and understand that you may need to probably get the cheapest strap option, because you're going to be getting an aftermarket strap to fit your wrist anyway. Definitely check the site links down in the description for full details and optionality there. But with that said, we'll go ahead and get this piece off the wrist, set up for some low light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. And of course, there is no loom, so we'll just get straight into the low light transition. Because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight, so it is nice to see with these colors, textures, and finishes. Ooh, render like in less than optimal lighting. You guys can see there's a lot of play here. Look at the deep engraving, the dimensions that are there. Very nice. You could see just the again, the 3D nature of those carvings. So very, very cool. And then the way the light is going to dance off of that, as well as the way that it's going to play off of this cool icy blue dial with that vertical brush there. Very, very cool. Again, although this is very traditional, it doesn't mean you can't have a nice bit of play there in terms of the playfulness of the dial, the visual interest. Again, those little details are just fantastic, whether it be really well lit under a macro or even here in this transitional lighting, thanks to their very strategic and highly executed finishing there. Of course, when people think fit and finish, a lot of times they think of just the fitment. It's hard to, get the full grasp of that when there aren't a lot of moving parts, when there's not a rotating bezel to judge, when there's not, articulation within a bracelet to judge. But I will say, again, the level of finishing here is very high level. And then the fitment between that fixed bezel and that case back, very uniform, very, very tight. You can see that it's held to a very tight tolerance. So this is going to be build quality that you would, of course, expect to see, from upper tier Swiss brands or German brands when it comes to that level of execution. So very highly executed and very, very impressive. So for me, guys, closing thoughts on the wrist, classic proportions with a twist, right? Slightly smaller at 37.5, but offset by that expansive dial that adds a ton of wrist presence and visual weight. In terms of model variants, it's available in 4 different dial color combinations. Do check the site links for current options and availability. In terms of comparable models, guys, the dress watch space isn't really my specialty, but in terms of quality and spec, this model compares really well against both Swiss and German competitors alike. And that's where you kind of get into that price point at just under $1,500. So for me, guys, bottom line, not everyone is into dress watches, and that's fine, but you kind of have to appreciate the elevated design and craftsmanship that Sero have been able to accomplish here. So yeah, it's for me quite impressive. It's not something that I seek out, but man, a watch like this lands in your lap, you want to take a closer look at it, wear it, see the different angles. It's quite impressive. So let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you're new, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.